Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Brass 101 presentation this evening. My name is Tom Kelly, and we're happy to have all of you joining us here tonight. We have a great program coming up for you over the next hour and 15 or 20 minutes. We're going to kick it off in just a minute with an introduction from Brass Chair Cindy Burlack. We're going to then bring on Ben Mirkins for our educational presentation. He'll do his presentation and end up with a Q&A. After that, we have special guest Jimmy Krupka from the U.S. ski team joining us, and we'll wrap things up tonight with a showing of off-piste. It's now my pleasure to introduce someone who went through a great tragedy back in 2015. But out of that tragedy, the families of Bryce and Ronnie have put together the Brass Avalanche Safety Foundation to help all of you learn how you can be safe in the backcountry. It's my pleasure to introduce now Cindy Burlack, the chair of Brass.
Hi, everybody. It's so good to be here with you with winter coming. I know there's a lot of snow in a lot of areas in the US now, so it's time to get ready with proper preparation. Thank you so much for taking your time to learn about avalanche safety. We could not bring this program to you without our dedicated sponsors, Utah Avalanche Center. You know, before you go, Nordica, Backcountry Access, World Cup Supply, and US Ski and Snowboard. Thank you all, thanks to all of them. And if you do business with them and have a chance to mention us, that would be awesome. We wish Ronnie, our son, and Bryce Astle of Alta had been provided the information you will hear tonight. They were like each of you. The more time on skis, the better. It was where they felt most at home. They are still making an impression, drawing in ski racers and recreationalists who are motivated to learn about snow safety. And they are the motivation behind Brass, which is Bryce and Ronnie Athlete Snow Safety. We're so proud of their accomplishments in ski racing and their legacies of being good young men who worked hard and took their goals seriously. All it takes is one day of not knowing snow dangers or poor decisions to bring all dreams and aspirations to a tragic end. The pain of losing our young men still hangs over the ski racing world after almost 8 years. So don't put your family through this. If you like powder, listen carefully tonight and take more classes. This information could make the difference in your coming home or not. I'd like to introduce Ben Mirkins, who's a personal friend, a great friend, and also has been a steady presenter for the last 3 years, which is the length that we've been doing this program. He's a faculty member at Northern Vermont University in the Outdoor Education Department. He's a highly qualified area course leader, which is a rarity in the Northeast because we just don't have that many avalanches. He's an avid rock and ice climber, mountain bike rider, backcountry skier, and he keeps his skills sharp by traveling throughout North America to the big mountains. Here's Ben.
Thanks so much, Cindy. It's an honor to be part of the Brass team, and it's an honor to be able to speak with all of you tonight about something that we're all really passionate about, snow. We're going to talk a bit about the risks we engage in while we're having our great times in the mountains. So why is avalanche education important for ski racers? You all are some of the best skiers in the world, and you will always be tempted to ski steep, fresh snow. This happens to be where avalanches occur. If this is your first step in gaining avalanche education, excellent work. You are right where you are supposed to be. If you've had some form of avalanche education in the past, good on you for being here and refreshing your knowledge. Avalanche education is a continuous and lifelong journey. We appreciate you brushing up on your skills. We're here today to set you up with the foundation needed to begin your avalanche education and to refresh those who might have had some avalanche education already. This in no way takes the place of a full avalanche course, but hopefully it gets you ready to engage in a full course this winter. So what is an avalanche? While there are many types such as slab avalanches, loose snow avalanches, dry avalanches, wet avalanches. An avalanche is simply snow falling down the mountain. They're fast, scary, and highly consequential events that can cause a lot of harm. Sometimes in the news, you'll read about an avalanche that strikes a victim and see a seemingly freak act of nature. The truth is, however, avalanches don't just strike randomly. For an avalanche to occur, you need the simple recipe of a slab, a weak layer, and a slope steep enough to slide, as well as a trigger, which could be you. By learning about avalanches and how to avoid them, you actually have the ability to increase the odds in your favor to stay safe while being out enjoying the mountains. Avoiding avalanches is the best way to stay safe, and in order to do that, you need to get some avalanche education. Wherever there's snow in the mountains, avalanches occur. No matter what the activity, either skiing, snowboarding, snowmobiling, hiking, or any other activity in the mountains, avalanches claim lives. On average, 27 people a year in the United States alone. These slopes in the photos look small and safe, yet they're both scenes of fatal avalanches. The avalanche in the photo on the right killed a young lady who was hiking beneath it. The slope on the left killed a snowboarder who was using it as a landing zone beneath the jump they built. Avalanches don't discriminate. You don't have to be riding a massive peak or skiing a gnarly couloir. While there are lots of different types of avalanches, they do all have one thing in common. They all occur on slopes steeper than 30 degrees. We'll talk about that a lot more later in this presentation, but keep in mind that all avalanches occurring on slopes steeper than 30 degrees. Before you go in the mountains, you must know the mountains. Welcome to the Know Before You Go program, where we'll teach you how to get the forecast, get the gear, get the training, and get the picture. We're about to go over what an avalanche forecast is, what it's used for, how it's made, and where to find it. Then we'll teach you about the essential gear, what to have with you while traveling in backcountry terrain, and why it's so dangerous to leave out even one of these items. But what good's the gear without training? We're going to talk about where to find avalanche education, why you need it, how it can help us avoid getting caught by an avalanche. Finally, we're going to put it all together and get the picture. We'll talk about how to utilize your gear, your training, your avalanche forecast, and your observations in the field to create a safe plan for your day in the mountains, and how to come home safe to your loved ones every day. So what's the first step in getting into the backcountry? The first step is understanding what an avalanche forecast is, where to find it, and understand why reading the forecast can help keep you safe in the mountains. Avalanches are all about timing. Danger in the mountains can spike drastically with each passing storm, but it's hard to predict exactly how much danger will rise. So how do we know when it's a good time to get out and recreate in the mountains? How do we know when we should just stay home or watch a movie? Avalanche forecasters spend their entire career perfecting the skill, and they relay this information to us to help us make informed decisions when traveling in the backcountry. Let's take a look at the day in the life of an avalanche forecaster and how they relay some important information that helps keep us safe. Here's a video clip to tell us a little more.
That's what happened!
What up, buddy? We got you, buddy. We got you, buddy. We're right here. All right. We got you.
Whether you're walking your dog, skiing, snowboarding, snowshoeing, snowmobiling, if you're heading out into mountains that have snow, you need to get an avalanche forecast.
The cool thing about forecasting is you're taking all of these different data points and all this really complex information and you're synthesizing it into something simple.
Get you these two in there?
Nikki, 80 is -2, 90 -3. So nice temperature gradient there between those two layers.
We're looking at observations from the public, from professional users, observations that we personally get in the field. And what we mean by those observations is snow pit results, new snow instabilities, wind, weather, anything that's actually going on in the backcountry, recent avalanches.
This is 2 to 4 millimeter. It's near surface facets.
Then we're putting that all in together and we're trying to get one simplified bottom line statement for what's going on.
Avalanche forecasts can really come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes. Different centers might use a little different format. But the bottom line, all of us are focusing about on the same information across the globe.
No matter where you are in the world, avalanche information is right at your fingertips.
And that's going to be weather information, snowpack information, information about recent avalanches, and what the overall avalanche danger is in a mountain range.
When you first check the forecast, one of the first things you're going to see is that bottom line statement. In that, we're going to discuss the avalanche danger scale.
The avalanche danger scale consists of 5 ascending levels from low to extreme. Your chance of encountering an avalanche increases dramatically with each level.
So we've got this scale that discusses size and distribution, the likelihood, and then overall travel advice for the day. Beyond just the bottom line statement, we're going to see avalanche problems.
It's just really important to recognize that there's different types of avalanches. The avalanche forecast is going to give you that information, which ultimately you can use to make better choices in the mountains.
You get the overall hazard, and then
An avalanche forecast isn't just done by one person. It's a huge team effort, not only by the forecast staff, but also by our local communities. What I find so special about the mountains is really the freedom and the friendships that you create out there. And it's my hope that other people can go into the mountains and experience this same joy that I do, and ultimately at the end of the day, come home safe.
Lots of critical information here. So what is in the avalanche forecast? Well, first we're going to talk about where you can find your local avalanche forecast. And you can find an avalanche forecast pretty much anywhere there's snow in the mountains. If you're traveling somewhere in the United States, you can go to avalanche.org to find your regional forecast. If you're traveling in Canada, Avalanche CA will get you their regional forecast. If you're going to Europe, check out avalanche.org and find that. Find your, or avalanches with an S.org to find the forecast in Europe. Here in the Northeast, which is where I am right now, not sure about all of you, we have the Mount Washington Avalanche Center. This was the last forecast from last year where they've gotten beyond the rating scale and giving a general advisory. But you can find daily avalanche forecasts at mountwashingtonavalanchecenter.org. During the winter season, they post every day advisories detailing the current avalanche danger rating, our regional weather, and daily snowpack information. You can sign up and get an email to you free every day. And then that way it's just easy to keep up with what's happening in the snow. The colors you see here represent avalanche danger rating, which is the backbone of every avalanche forecast. You can see here from the North American Danger Scale, there are 5 danger ratings: low, moderate, considerable, high, and extreme. Even at a low danger rating, while human-triggered avalanches are unlikely, they're not impossible. Can anyone guess where most avalanche danger, what danger rating most avalanche fatalities occur? In North America, nearly half of our avalanche fatalities have occurred in moderate or considerable danger rating. When the avalanche danger is high or extreme, people know to stay out of the mountains, which is why we don't see a lot of fatalities at this hazard rating. When it drops from high to considerable or moderate, people begin venturing out into more challenging terrain, which is when we see most avalanche accidents. It's like car accidents during a snowstorm. When the snow is at its peak intensity, when the roads are covered in feet of snow, people aren't driving. It's when the snow first begins to fall and all the roads aren't quite cleared yet, or at the end of a storm, where people are getting in accidents when they're getting out there. Who's read an avalanche forecast before? Have you checked it on the days, even a few days before you've gone out to get a feel for what's going on in the backcountry? Ideally, if you know you're going to be traveling in avalanche terrain in a specific area, you follow their forecast in advance and gain a better understanding of what's happening in the snowpack that you'll soon be in. Regardless of that advanced preparation, every day before going out into the backcountry, you need to be aware of the current avalanche conditions. Luckily, we have our local avalanche forecast center to provide daily avalanche forecasts throughout the winter, but it only works if you read it. As you read the avalanche forecast more and more, you'll become familiar with many of the types of avalanches. Why is this important? Each type of avalanche is managed differently when we're in the mountains. If the main avalanche problems for the day are small, isolated avalanches, our travel plan would be drastically different than a day when the main avalanche problems are huge, widespread avalanches. Regardless, all these different avalanches are dangerous and can have devastating consequences if caught in them. The task of changing our travel plans based on current avalanche problems might seem daunting, but luckily we can get this information by reading the avalanche forecast. We mentioned earlier that avalanche safety is all about timing. Some days in the mountains are screaming at you to stay out. Other days they're greeting you with open arms saying, come on in. Avalanche forecasts help us understand how to identify these days by describing the avalanche danger through a bottom line statement, describing recent and expected weather, reviewing recent avalanches they've seen or heard about in the field, and informing us what type of avalanche problems might exist in the mountains on any given day. By reading the forecast and obtaining as much information as we can before going into the mountains, we can drastically reduce our risk and increase our odds of making it back to the car at the end of the day. But before you make that first step into the backcountry, you need to make sure you're prepared with the essential safety gear. So we know how to get the regional avalanche forecast and why we need to read it every day we go into the mountains. However, there's some other things we need before we can head out. We now need to get the gear. In this section, we'll discuss what the essential avalanche safety gear is, what each piece is used for, and why it's important that everyone carry all three. Even after reading the avalanche forecast, we need to be prepared for the worst. Imagine staring at a massive debris field of an avalanche that just swallowed your partner. Can anyone tell me where in this debris field your partner might be located? Without the proper rescue gear, your chances of finding your partner and saving their life is essentially zero. Let's take a look at what gear we need to carry to increase our odds of surviving and why everyone must carry all the essential gear. Here's a quick video for you.
But I feel like there is so many new users to the backcountry. It scares me. It scares me that everyone thinks I just buy this expensive gear and I can get on the chairlift and I'll be fine. Get the gear, but get the education, understand how to use it, and have solid backcountry partners.
I'm worried about storm slabs in alpine and tree line on all slopes.
Avalanche observed yesterday on the parkway. South expected on Alaska.
The reality is, backcountry is getting busier and busier. There's just more and more people out there. So with that comes a higher level of risk.
We've all heard a lot of stories about people who didn't even have a beacon on or no shovel, no probe. And that would have been the thing that would have saved them.
Got you.
It is a really pretty helpless situation to be in if you don't have the right tools.
There's my milkshakes!
There's really no outside help. You know, it's really up to their partners to get to them as quickly as possible and know how to use a transceiver a probe and a shovel, use it well, and dig them out of the snow.
What's it like?
In a full burial, your heart's beating and you don't know how long you're going to be riding it out for and how much oxygen you're eventually going to have. Time is of the essence. I want to know when I'm going to the backcountry that I have a solid partner and they're super familiar with using that equipment.
We're right here. We got you.
If you've been in an avalanche and someone's buried, that's where having the gear and knowing how to use it can make all the difference in the outcome.
All right, so we talked about, they mentioned 3 essential pieces of gear for avalanche rescue. Each piece of avalanche rescue gear plays an important role in the event of an avalanche. Let's look at each one. We use our transceivers to navigate the debris field to zero in on where our partner is buried, so that we are searchable, so that others can find us if we're buried. We then use our probe to get a precise burial location. This is your lifeline to your partner. Once you get a positive probe strike, you leave the probe in place to ensure you don't lose their location. Finally, you must quickly assemble your shovel and dig as fast as you can to uncover the buried victim. This is the hardest and most time-consuming part of the avalanche rescue. And believe it or not, the part that research has recently done the most to make faster, if you have the training. With very little time to spare, ourselves and our partners need to be extremely well trained with these pieces of equipment to have the best chance of successfully rescuing the victim. Another amazing piece of equipment that can help save your life in the backcountry is an avalanche airbag. When deployed correctly, the airbag can help you become a bigger piece in the avalanche debris, hopefully bringing you to rest at the top of the debris pile. While airbags are a great tool to have in the mountains, they're not considered required gear because they don't always work perfectly. It's like an airbag in a car. While they might help you survive a car accident, they don't protect you 100% of the time. That's why we need to learn to avoid getting caught in the first place. In addition to avalanches, there are many other hazards associated with traveling in the backcountry. Whether on a snow machine, snow bike, skis, or a snowboard, a helmet is an important life-saving preventative safety measure to protect you. Additionally, an extensive first aid kit, an extra jacket, a pair of gloves can all save you in the case of trauma or hypothermia. Radios can drastically improve group communication, especially when riding in stormy conditions. Some other items that can come in handy include a multi-tool, gear repair kit, slope inclinometer, compass, sunscreen, headlamp, a hard copy of the map of where you're traveling, and last but not least, food and water. Don't forget, you need an avalanche backpack to carry all this gear, with sleeves designed to carry your shovel and probe. Unfortunately, all this gear does not guarantee your safety. Let's take a step back and talk about why this gear is important to carry. 25% of avalanche fatalities are caused by trauma that occur while the avalanche is taking place. If 4 people are buried in an avalanche, chances are only 3 people will have any chance at survival. While this might sound grim, you have the ability to save the lives of the remaining 75%, but only if you're carrying the essential gear and know how to use it. So how much time do we have? Take a second to digest this graph. This graph's showing you the probability of surviving an avalanche burial versus burial time. Might look grim at first, but if you look closely, there is a silver lining. Research has proven that if we can locate and uncover our partners quickly, they have a strong chance of surviving. 10 minutes, however, is not a lot of time to work with. Think about hitting the snooze on your morning alarm. Does that ever feel like enough time? Unfortunately, if you can't locate, probe, and dig your partner out from avalanche debris in the short time frame, their chances of not coming home are 80 to 90%. That's why everyone traveling in the mountains must be carrying transceiver or beacon, shovel, and probe. Due to how quickly the odds of survival drop as time goes by, the victim's partners are solely responsible for the rescue. Imagine how long it would take to call for help, for that help to arrive, and then to have the search for a buried person. It's nearly impossible for a professional rescue team to come in and save you or your partner. Therefore, your partners are the rescue party. While we want to avoid getting caught in an avalanche at all costs, we need to be prepared with the proper gear in case of a disaster. It's not enough to carry the gear, however. You need to know how to use it. The more you practice and get to know your rescue gear, the more the odds are stacked in your partner's favor in the event of an avalanche burial. Okay, you may be thinking to yourself, perfect, I've got the avalanche forecast, I've got the gear, and I'm ready to head to the hills. Hold on, we're only halfway there. We now need to get the training. Do you know how to avoid getting caught in an avalanche in the first place? Avalanche education can help us identify avalanche terrain before entering it. Can help us identify the bullseye information of high avalanche danger and can stack the odds in our favor to having a great day in the mountains while all returning to our cars at the end of the day. Let's take a look at some things you learn in an avalanche course.
I was so keen at that point in time and really didn't know what was safe and not. That avalanche was definitely a bit eye-opening to how quickly things can go wrong in the backcountry. I got lucky, but unfortunately, a lot of people do not. With a little bit of avalanche training, a lot of accidents can be avoided. Looking at the bulletin, it's been warm yesterday and then cooled down quite a bit overnight. And probably the main concern today would be the wet loose on the sunny. If anybody has the motivation to go out into the backcountry, whether that's skiing, sledding, riding, I would say an entry-level avalanche course is totally critical. Perfect. Your general entry-level avalanche course will have fundamental knowledge about avalanches, how snow and layers and snowpack work. We're just looking for a good site for a profile. Let's dig. Typically, you do a little bit of avalanche rescue practice. So you get your transceivers out, probe, shovel. And the beacon just comes down to the knee and you just move forward. Practice with that gear so that you know what to do if something were to go wrong. Bit about trip planning, reading the avalanche hazard bulletins, and then sort of picking a suitable trip. You'll do a little bit about traveling through avalanche terrain.
The number one problem of the day was the wet loose avalanches, which is what's raising the avalanche hazard for the day. We've got a little one starting. That's a good indicator of where things are going.
Well, the mountains and the snowpack can feel quite complex at times. The sort of entry-level avalanche courses give you some fundamental knowledge that allows you to maybe make sense of some of the things that you're observing out in the mountains. And that fundamental knowledge can be useful to avoid avalanche accidents. I personally couldn't imagine a life without skiing and climbing in the mountains. It just gives you so much vitality in your life, which is awesome. With anything, to be a master of your craft takes a lot of practice and a lot of time, and it's an ongoing sort of lifelong learning process. I've been working with avalanches for 15 years now, and I'm still learning every day.
So what do you learn in an introductory level avalanche course? Avalanche education is a lifelong journey. There's no such thing as too much avalanche education. I still seem to be taking a course or so every year and learning from those I'm around. So from avalanche classes to beacon parks, there are many ways to learn about the hazards of avalanches and what to do if your party is ever caught in one. The best method is getting hands-on, face-to-face experience with an avalanche class. Not to mention, it's a lot of fun too. You get to go for a tour and learn how to do it right. In these avalanche courses, you'll learn much more than what we're covering tonight. You'll get face-to-face, hands-on training and how to use the avalanche forecast to plan a trip in the mountains. You'll learn how to use that avalanche rescue gear to locate your partner and save their life in the event of an emergency. You'll learn how to assess snow stability by observing unique layers in the snowpack and how to spot bullseye information of rising avalanche danger when you're in the mountains. You'll learn how to get the big picture perspective of what's happening in the mountains to plan a fun day in the backcountry and come home safe. Avalanche education is a lifelong process. There's always something to learn when it comes to the mountains. Even professionals take avalanche classes and practice their rescue skills with their friends every season. When I first started getting into the backcountry, all I could see were amazing mountains draped in snow. When I looked at the mountains, I would daydream about which line would ride the best and where the deepest snow would be. Once I started my avalanche education, I began seeing much more than just a beautiful peak covered in powder. I started to learn how tiny features of the slope could tell you a whole lot about avalanche hazard. Imagine you're traveling through the mountains and you come across this beautiful basin. While you're having an amazing view at it, there are actually a ton of avalanche clues just waiting to be noticed. Do you notice any of these clues? A slab avalanche. If you see recent avalanche in the mountains, think there might be a potential for another one? Obvious clues like this large avalanche are easy to spot and can tell you bullseye information on where avalanche potential exists. In an avalanche class, you'll learn exactly what information to pay attention to when looking at recent avalanches and how to use that information to stay safe when traveling in the mountains. This isn't the only thing I noticed when looking at the landscape. Did anyone notice anything else? What about a smaller loose snow avalanche? Notice how this avalanche is on a sunny slope compared to the shadier, larger avalanche. What can we take away from this? Can we expect similar, smaller avalanches on slopes like this? In fact, there's a ton of information you can extrapolate just by looking at the mountain. Too much to go over in this presentation. Taking an avalanche class allows you to unlock the mountains and see them in a way you've never seen them before. Foregoing this education can leave you blind in a dangerous environment. So, how do you sign up for an avalanche course? Find out more information on avalanche classes in your area. Go to your local avalanche center's site. And there's like on this slide, we're showing Mount Washington Avalanche Center. They have a link for course providers and guide services that offer courses around the Mount Washington Valley, where our most frequent avalanche activity is. A great place to learn learn. So you can check out the Know Before You Go online learning platform and continue learning section. But get real training. Register for a course. Our next step is to get the picture. Getting the picture is all about being aware in the mountains. You need to know how to read the forecast, what gear you need, and where to find a class. And get the picture, you'll learn how to identify avalanche terrain so you can avoid avalanches. Learn safe travel habits to minimize your risk, and learn how to identify rising avalanche conditions in the field.
Avalanche terrain is simply terrain steep enough to shred.
reality is the fun places in the backcountry are the places where avalanches are possible. It only takes one bad mistake to
Avalanche. Killed in an avalanche.
to lead to a lot of pain for a lot of people.
In order to safely travel in the backcountry, you need to understand the bigger picture. Firstly, you need to recognize avalanche terrain and how to safely travel through it. Secondly, you need to constantly observe the ever-changing conditions. Welcome to the final chapter.
It's really important to understand that the second you step in the backcountry, you're going into terrain that hasn't received any active avalanche mitigation.
It's important that you can recognize avalanche terrain. By definition, avalanche terrain is any slope steeper than 30 degrees.
No one can be a perfect avalanche forecaster. Snow science is an inexact science.
When you look at the forecast in the morning and make that assessment, you have to be prepared for the fact that the conditions could actually change during the day.
The one constant is terrain, and what we can do is position ourselves with best terrain practices through it. So you think about moving through the mountains, there is safe zone to safe zone, and it's those best terrain practices that set us up for success. We're all going out as a group for the A objective, but along the way, we may have some sort of weather characteristic that changes that decision.
It's really helpful to just have some big red flags that are telling you it's time to reevaluate. And those things are rapid snowfall, rapid wind, shooting cracks, whoomphing, recent avalanches, or rapid warm-up.
We've just moved to the trees, and at this point, wherever we go is avalanche terrain. In order to minimize our exposure as a group, we're going to go from safe zone to safe zone, moving one at a time through this terrain.
Having guidelines are very effective ways to give yourself a framework where you're less inclined to make emotional decisions that could be bad ones.
Just like on the way up, we're going to expose one person at a time on this slope. I'm about to drop in. Do you guys have eyes on?
Yes.
Awesome, let's do that.
Dropping in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
The skill set to safely travel in the backcountry is something that's achievable by anybody. It's important that you dedicate yourself to understanding the basics.
So you've got the gear, you've got the training, you've got the forecast, you've got the picture. Let's go get the goods.
Well, there's a lot to take in when getting the picture. Let's start with the most important topic the video would have told you about. What exactly is avalanche terrain? We keep hearing this magic number of 30 degrees, but how do we know what it looks like when we're in the mountains? Who thinks that this slope, this in the larger picture here, is avalanche terrain? Yep, there is a huge avalanche here. What else do you notice about the picture? A bunch of ski tracks all over the slope. Just because there's tracks on the slope does not mean it's safe to ride, right? People clearly skied this before this avalanche happened. What about this slope? Does it have the potential to avalanche? Slope angle is everything when determining what is and isn't avalanche terrain. And guess what? It is extremely hard to estimate slope angle when you're out in the field. We need to continuously train our eyes to identify avalanche terrain and what it looks like in order to stay safe in the mountains. While these two photos show very different slope angles, once you approach a slope nearing 30 degrees, you need to be on your toes. Being wrong by even a few degrees can determine whether you make it back home safe at the end of the day. Why is training our eyes to identify avalanches to avalanche terrain so important? Well, for one, it keeps us off of and away from slopes that can potentially avalanche. But more importantly, we need to know where to go if there's an avalanche hazard. When we're blessed by a storm that drops feet upon feet of cold, dry snow in the mountains, you can bet the avalanche danger spikes. But there's still a ton of fun to be had up there. For days like these, we need to know how to find safe slopes under 30 degrees that are not connected to any avalanche terrain. The truth is, if you're not in avalanche terrain, you can't get caught in an avalanche. The line between avalanche terrain and non-avalanche terrain is invisible, but it's the difference between life and death. Also, for this reason, you should know that you never have to be in avalanche terrain if you don't want to be. You can always tell your partners no, and having an honest conversation with your partners about expectations in the field is an important part of staying safe and something you learn how to do in a way that seems manageable during an avalanche course. What if we're not traveling on skis or a splitboard? What if we're out in the mountains on a scenic hike, or we're grouped up on our sleds watching our partners ride? The same rules apply to how you get around, no matter how you get around in the mountains. Is your lunch spot at the bottom of a large steep hill? Have you parked your sled too close to the bottom of the hill that your partner's riding? We always need to be asking, if an avalanche occurred right now, am I in its path? What if we're not in the backcountry? Do we need to be aware of slopes over 30 degrees when we're at a resort? That's a complicated answer. That's a complicated question. And the answer is, it depends. We will get to talk a little more about that. But let's start to pull it all together. Now you know what avalanche terrain is, but how do you manage terrain if you have to travel through it? Take a look at these photos. What's wrong here? As we travel uphill and down, we want to ensure we're only exposing one person to avalanche danger at a time. If an avalanche occurred from above in these photos, how many people would get caught? And who'd be there to help do the rescue? If you have to travel through avalanche terrain, even for just a brief moment, it's best to be spread out so only one person's exposed at a time. Who here loves to go ride at Mammoth Mountain or Vail or Jackson Hole or Tahoe, and you hear bombs going off in the morning and off in the distance? The ski patrollers are out there putting in a ton of work to virtually eliminate the risk of an inbound rider getting caught in an avalanche. Not eliminate, but pretty close. They're doing a great job out there. They're up before the crack of dawn every morning, managing the risk in the mountains and mitigating avalanches. This is why I love riding resorts during a high danger day, because patrollers are making a lot of those decisions for me. I'll still wear my beacon, but I'm much less concerned. Once you cross that area boundary line, once you're outside of the avalanche control, you are in the backcountry. Those preemptive measures don't exist. You have to be aware of avalanche hazard. Ski patrol will not be able to get to you or your partners within that 10 minutes it would take to keep you alive. You are entering the backcountry when you go through that gate, and you and your partners are your own rescue team. What if you go to Europe? What if you're in the Alps or the Pyrenees? In North America, the difference between areas controlled and not controlled by avalanches are marked with a boundary line or backcountry gate. In Europe, however, once you leave the groomed area, you're entering uncontrolled avalanche terrain, even if it's still within the ski area boundaries. This is a really critical distinction. How do we know when avalanche conditions are changing? The snowpack is always talking to us, and it's our job to listen. Avalanches aren't random acts of nature. We can usually tell they're about to happen. there are a few clues to look for that scream an avalanche might occur. Let's discuss the most obvious signs of rising avalanche danger. One clear sign is other recent avalanches. Avalanches are a herd species, meaning if you see one of them, there will probably be more. When you see recent avalanches in the field, it's important to note what elevation and aspect it occurred on so you can avoid similar slopes when in the backcountry. Seeing a recent avalanche in the field is free. What's frequently called bullseye information. And we need to acquire that from a safe distance, but it's extremely important to take note of. I bet when you've been walking around on snow, you've had times where you hear or feel a collapse, and you hear that whoomph, a loud whoomph. If you've ever witnessed this before, you've already seen or felt or heard one of these red flags. In fact, this collapse or audible whoomping is the settling of snow. And if you'd been on a steep slope, it would have been an avalanche. It would have led to an avalanche. These are bullseye clues that there's significant avalanche hazard in the backcountry. Another red flag we want to be aware of is wind-drifted snow. Wind is easily observed in the mountain. It's often loud and annoying. Not only does the wind affect our level of comfort, but it's also playing a huge role in creating avalanche hazard. On Mount Washington, here in the Northeast, this is a huge factor that creates our top avalanche problem on most days. When the wind is strong enough, it can carry snow that's already fallen into sensitive wind drifts that can easily avalanche during and after these wind events. When it's windy in the mountains, we want to pay attention to how strong it's blowing and which direction it's coming from. We pay attention to where the wind is coming from because we want to know where the wind is creating these slabs of wind-drifted snow, usually the opposite side of the compass from where it's coming from. For example, a strong west wind could create drifts on east-facing slopes, which is why Tuckerman Ravine is always so full of snow and often really unstable until that springtime when we have that melt freeze. The next red flag we can indicate rising avalanche danger from is heavy snowfall. This is a bit of a letdown because when the snow is coming down by the foot, the riding must be good out there. However, we got to have patience. With heavy snowfall comes a ton of weight being added to the snowpack in a short time. The snowpack needs time to adjust to its new load, and we need to wait for that time to pass. The good news, remember, we can enjoy days like these on slopes under 30 degrees that are not connected to avalanche terrain. Additionally, rain can quickly weaken the snowpack and cause danger to spike. However, when it's raining in the mountains, nobody really wants to be out there, so it's an easy decision to stay home, or at least out of that terrain. The final red flag that indicates rising avalanche danger is rapidly rising temperatures. This is an easy red flag to identify because we're normally overheating, just like the snow is. We can feel the snow getting wet. Rapidly rising temperatures can cause the snow surface to lose cohesion, which causes the likelihood of wet avalanches to rise. In addition to feeling the rising temperature ourselves, the mountains will begin to showing signs that it's time to turn around. Roller balls or pinwheels shown in these pictures indicate that the snow surface is becoming too wet for safe travel. When we see these roller balls, it's time to turn around and head for shadier slopes. Okay, so we just talked for quite a while about avalanches. It can seem a little overwhelming, but by following these 4 simple steps, you'll be on track to gain the proper education and experience needed to have fun while in the mountains. You know how to get the forecast and what information is included in them. You know what gear you must carry. You know the importance of signing up for an avalanche course, and you know some safe travel practices when moving through the mountains. Now it's time to take the next step and get the goods. We also have a brief video from Brass talking about human factors. Super important part of your avalanche education.
most important factors in snow safety is decision making. Hi, I'm Jess Shade. I'm a mental health therapist and a high altitude ski mountaineer, and I'm thrilled to join Brass Avalanche in providing insight into how you can be safe in the backcountry. What do all fatal avalanches have in common? Snow, of course, and people. We are the common denominator. Today we are going to cover the following topics: awareness, decision-making and risk, group dynamics, and goal-driven choices. How aware are you right now? What are your surroundings? Who is with you? What did you do right before logging on? As humans, our brains value efficiency. We can't pause to think about every single movement, from brushing our teeth to walking the dog. We often find ourselves on autopilot. However, sometimes exiting autopilot really matters. When you are considering exiting resort boundaries, skiing off-piste in restricted areas, how aware are you? Are you slowing down long enough to ask, do I have the training? Do I have avalanche gear? Who am I with? What's the danger rating? And what are the avalanche problems today? Awareness is the first step to both safety and fun. So in terms of self-knowledge, how do you make decisions? Do you trust your gut? Do you assess every potentiality? Do you ask someone else and follow their advice? Is it a mix of these? Thinking about this from the perspective of an athlete, how do you train and prepare? Do you have a plan for a race or for an event? How intentional are you? Also under self-knowledge, how do you view risk? How do you know if the risk is worth the reward? To aid in evaluating risk, here's a straightforward tool called the risk equation. So your risk score equals the likelihood of the risk occurring multiplied by the severity should the risk occur, multiplied by the time of exposure to the risk. If you can't answer the risk equation, you're gambling. Is it worth it? Often we do not find ourselves making decisions and evaluating risk alone. We're in a group, which can complicate things. So here are some questions to ask yourself before stepping out into off-piste or backcountry terrain. Who are you with? Just a simple list of the people can cue our awareness. How well do you know them? How do they make decisions and view risk? What is their knowledge? Are they trustworthy in avalanche terrain? Are you trying to impress them? Could you tell them no if you wanted to? Would you follow them no matter what? When we cede our ability to make decisions about risk, we outsource our safety. Goals are important to all of us, especially in athletic endeavors like skiing and snowboarding. Goals are one of the best ways to direct intentional decision-making. So what is your goal? Why are you out there? Is your goal the stoke train, peer pressure, impressing a teammate, or is it different? Often we are motivated by things that aren't actually our goals. For example, social factors often influence our decisions, even if the decision works against a goal. I'll stay up late to hang out, but be exhausted for training, school, the new job I'm psyched about. Or, I'll exit the resort boundary because everyone else wants to, but I'd like to scout the course one more time to prepare for my race. Does this risk relate to my goal? And at what cost? Bryce Astle and Ronnie Burlak were skiers, just like you and I. They were great skiers. On that day in 2015, they made decisions, as did their teammates and their coaches. There were many decisions made that day that could have changed the outcome. Exiting the gates, skiing off-piste, or closed terrain is stepping into risk. Are you aware of yourself and your partners? What goal do you have? How does skiing backcountry, out of area, or off-piste terrain relate to your goal? On behalf of Brass Avalanche, thank you for your attention. Be safe out there this winter.
All right. I think we are now going to take some questions, and we have, there's Tom.
There we go. Thank you very much, Ben. We have time for questions right now. I know you've got one in the Q&A right now from Cameron Spring. Can a small slush avalanche cause a bigger one?
Yeah, great question, Cameron. Not typically. It can happen. What small are called, we have our, I won't get into too technical for you, but small slush avalanches like you're seeing, loose, what do we call loose wet, happen a lot in the springtime, and they typically are a surface problem. They rarely lead to bigger slab avalanches. It can happen, but it's rare.
So if you have any questions, you can put them into the Q&A dialog box or into the chat box. Either one, happy to have Ben answer any questions, however crazy it might seem to you. Please feel free to put your questions into the chat box. Hope this has been productive for you. While we're waiting for a few others, Ben, this is great education to get things started. But if people want to go to the next step and learn a little bit more, what options do they have?
They have tons of options. Here in the Northeast, in the Mount Washington Valley, there are lots of courses. We do have some in Vermont as well. A lot of the providers are listed on the Mount Washington Avalanche Center's page. I teach a couple of public courses every year, as well as ones I do for the college here. But there are a lot of great providers. Most of them are listed on the Mount Washington Avalanche Center page. One of the big organizations is AIRI, the American Institute of Avalanche Research and Education, and all their courses are listed on their page, and you can look through that as well. See, we got a couple.
Another good resource, you can go to brassavalanche.org as well. And we had a question from Stephen Monroe. What is the best way to find on snow training classes? And that's what you're referring to with the AIRI classes and others, right?
Yes, exactly. And I see, how does the probe work is another question. Great question there. Essentially, you use your beacon to get the lowest number you possibly can. And the probe is just basically like a long stick where you're poking and trying to find that pinpoint where the person actually is. So you find your lowest reading, you probe there, and then you probe out in concentric circles if you don't hit it on the first time, on the first strike.
Another follow-up from Stephen Monroe. How often should you replace your transceiver? This was something that came up in our sessions with the U.S. ski team the past couple of days in Copper Mountain. How often should you replace a transceiver?
Yeah, great question. So the more recent studies have shown we get drift, signal drift, so issues with them at about 10 years. I will say from personal experience, it's incredible. The new beacons have just continued to improve. They have faster processors. And I had probably had my beacon for about 5 years, and I replaced it last year. And I actually bought 2 different beacons to experiment and was totally blown away by how different a new beacon was than a 5-year-old beacon. The processors have really improved. And I see another question about how much does a kit cost? It ranges. A beacon is usually around between $300 and $500. And your probe and shovel are quite a bit less expensive. I'd say usually like BCA, who's one of our big sponsors, has these great kits that are around $350. You get beacon, probe, and shovel. Great deal. They're one of those beacons that I was talking about experimenting with is a Tracker 4. And I was just blown away by how simple it was and how quickly it worked. I actually bought them immediately. I bought a fleet of them for my program here at the college because I was very impressed with how easy they are. Range of a beacon, it varies a bit by company. Great to do a range check when you get a new beacon, usually around 50 to 60 meters, which seems really big when you're standing in a field here in the Northeast. When you get into bigger terrain in, say, Avalanche, or even in Colorado or California, it feels a lot smaller. You know, the terrain feels huge, and that 50, 60 meters doesn't feel like so much. Yeah, good call. Somebody said about some transceiver recalls. Absolutely. Staying aware of these recalls is super important. It has only been a very small percentage that have been subject to the recall, but important to be aware of.
One other thing I learned the last couple of days in sessions we did over at Copper with the US ski team is it's important to keep other electronics away from your transceiver. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so other electronics, especially those that have Bluetooth enabled control, those can cause interference, and they can cause interference with search as well as with sending signals. So we generally, at the very least, we want to turn off our Bluetooth. We want to put our phones in airplane mode when we're traveling in the backcountry and avalanche terrain.
We've got a couple of other really good questions. I'm going to take one, a fairly simple one first, and the other one's going to be an interesting answer, I'm sure, from you. But Cameron Spring was asking, how young is too young to go out in the backcountry?
Depends on the individual. I have had a huge range of folks I've traveled with. I would say if they're a fit kid and they love it, they want to do it, that's a big key. They want to get out there and go for a tour, that's a great idea. There's no reason they have to go in avalanche terrain, right? They're going to have a lot more fun skiing untouched POW in the trees and not being stressed and having to carry all that extra gear. I like, in terms of taking kids into avalanche terrain, I would take that responsibility very, very seriously and be very hesitant to do it. You want people who are able to make those decisions for themselves, or you just want to choose the options where it's really minimal risk.
Got a great question from Daniel Kelly about the Expert Halo. This is something we also talked with the US ski team about. I think a lot of us will remember that tragic state of Washington. Talk about that concept, Ben, and how important it is to break through that and make good decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. That Tunnel Creek was a real tragedy. I had a good friend who was patrolling that day, who actually might be watching right now. One of my main ski partners here now. So the Expert Halo played a huge role in that day and does in many days. And that's the idea that you're with someone who you consider to be an expert. And instead of using your own knowledge, your own thoughts, you just follow them blindly. We were actually talking about a great article by Ian McCammon that put out this idea of the Expert Halo and the idea of heuristics in one of my courses this past week, and talked about the idea of like, hey, we can have that conversation where I tell you like these are the dangers and we don't want to go into this terrain. But then if I start walking into avalanche terrain, are you just going to follow me, or are you going to call it out and say, no, you're wrong, hold back? And I think that's a really important piece, or at least being willing to ask your friends why they think it's okay. Why do they think it's safe to go where they're going? That's a powerful question.
We have a couple more questions, and then we're going to close out the Q&A and bring on Jimmy Krupka. How do you find a place to go and practice using your beacon? And can you kind of come up with a test area yourself with your friends?
Yeah, so there is a test area that's set up at Pinkham Notch Visitor Center in Mount Washington, where there's a beacon park, and you can turn on beacons once there's snow on the ground and be able to practice multiple burials and all that sort of good stuff. But if you take a rescue course, which is a one-day course, they'll teach you methods for practicing. You just need an extra beacon, and you can bury it in a backpack or a stuff sack, or just put it under a board. A padded board is helpful, so when you probe, it feels soft. I try to do a night every season with friends where we have a potluck and we have fun. We just get together with friends and we do a little lesson, a refresher about beacons, and we go out and we do all sorts of different burials, and we post our times on a whiteboard, and we make it a little bit of a contest, but we get everybody refreshed.
And then lastly, well, actually, we have one more question on beacons. Sure. I love this question, actually. What do you think about wearing a beacon inbounds or in area?
Yeah, I would say it depends. I would definitely wear one inbounds on a big storm day. You hear bombs going off all morning, mitigation work. There's no reason not to, right? It's going to make you searchable, and it's going to give you the power to search for someone else if someone else is buried. There's really no reason not to.
Yeah, I do that now too. It really is good counsel.
Yeah. And relative to the experience of airbag effectiveness, I go back and forth on my own personal feelings about airbags, because I worry about something similar to the expert halo, the idea of the risky shift, right? I might make more risky decisions when I wear the airbag, which scares me a little bit. I'd like to think I have the ability to control myself better than that. But we all know when you take off your seatbelt in a car, you're gonna drive slower. So I do think they work though. Generally speaking, they're way better than not having one on if you are caught, all else being equal.
Well, Ben Mirkin, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge with us here today. We appreciate you having on our brass team of instructors. And if you're out in the Northeast and you see Ben, say hi to him this winter. Ben, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to move on now to our featured guest this evening, and we have a very special guest coming up. Give me a second to get the screen share going here. I want to just give another shout out to all of our brass sponsors for helping to make this possible. You can see them up on the screen. Give them a shout out and let them know that you heard about it here at Brass 101. And I'm going to get the right presentation up there. Stand by. Okay, there we are. Really happy to welcome Jimmy Krupka here this evening. Jimmy grew up skiing in Vermont. He came out of the Green Mountain Valley School, also skied at Dartmouth, been with the U.S. ski team for the last couple of years. Really happy to have him joining us here this evening. And before we bring him up onto the screen, if you haven't checked out his Arc City podcast yet, please do that. It is awesome. I listened to a couple of episodes yesterday. If you've got your phones handy, put them up on the screen and scan the QR code, and that'll take you right to the Spotify version of Jimmy's podcast, and you can subscribe and listen to all of them through the coming season. So I'm going to bring Jimmy up on the screen here. And Jimmy, thank you so much for joining us here tonight. And you're coming to us from Copper Mountain tonight, right?
I am. Sorry, I'm in the car right now. I had to go to a meeting in Frisco, but I'm here and I'm very happy to be here. So thanks for having me.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. For folks that might not know you, why don't you give us a little bit of 411 on your background and how you grew up ski racing and what the important steps were in your pathway to the top?
Yeah. So I was born in Boston. I used to do the weekend program up in Vermont. So I lived in Boston and we drive up to Vermont every weekend. I wasn't originally going to be a ski racer. My parents were big skiers, but they weren't big ski racers. But I was just so stoked on ski racing and convinced them to put me in the program. Went to GMVS, like you said, really loved Vermont. Vermont always will have a special place in my heart. Lived there for a good 8 years. And now I've been living out west, Park City, a little time in Colorado, training with the U.S. team. I had a couple years where I was cut, so I skied for Dartmouth College. And now I'm back training with the team. This is my kind of second year coming back from a broken leg. I did the tib fib about a year and a half ago. But I'm on the NORAM circuit and trying to work my way to the World Cup.
Let's go back a couple of years. You were at Junior Worlds a couple of years and had a pretty good finish. And back in 2019 in Val d'Ifasa. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that was a special experience. We were actually the best men's junior team in the world that year. And it was a special group of guys: Kyle Negamir, River Radamus, Jet Seymour, Ben Ritchie, Jacob Dilling. There's a whole bunch of guys leading the charge there. And so to me, like, that World Juniors experience was about the team. And it was just, ski racing is an individual sport, but the few times you get to be part of a team like that and searching for a team goal, it's really, really fun. And we everything just kind of came together for the slalom. I didn't have a great combined, I didn't have a great super G, and the slalom was the last day. And I just told myself, like, it's got to happen. It's got to happen. And first run was pretty good. And then second run, I was nervous as hell. So any young ski racers out there, like, nerves are real and there's no getting rid of them. But I just kind of told myself, yep, nervous, still going to do it. And I put down a good run and ended up sixth, which is a result I was proud of.
Sweet. Let's talk a little bit about team. It's very clear. You listen to your podcast, the relationship you have with your teammates like River Radamus, and also just watching you guys over at Copper at your training camp the last few days. Team is really important to the success of all the individuals, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely is. You look at any successful ski racer generally has a good team around them. Sometimes they don't have athletes around them. They'll have coaches and techs, but everybody's got a support system. I love when there's a group of athletes pushing each other, competing with each other, but also helping each other. And I think the U.S. ski team is starting to show that. If you want to look at really good examples, the Norwegians are a good example to follow too.
So you're over in Copper Mountain right now. The training camp is going on. Excellent conditions with the early snowfall. Tell folks about what goes on at a preseason camp like this. What are you trying to dial in now, just a few weeks ahead of the start of the season?
Yeah, it's a really cool atmosphere to be at Copper Mountain right now. They just had a fist race, and it's probably the most stacked fist race I've ever seen. It's 25 of the top 30 downhill skiers in the world. And you watch them, they're going through their right before the season starts, they're going through their kind of final checklist. So they're taking fewer runs. They're trying to make every run feel like a race run. They're testing skis to try to find which ski is a couple tenths faster. They're testing tuning setups. They're just dialing in the little details. And this is the point where they just, start to get ready to just go fast.
Yeah. Are you training? You're more a technical skier. Are you training just tech over there? Or are you trying to get in a little bit of speed work too?
Getting a little speed work in. And that was actually a big development for me. I broke my leg skiing Super G, and getting over that, for lack of a better word, getting over that trauma was difficult. And trusting myself to go fast again has been a big victory this year. So I've done a couple of days of speed training. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you trust yourself now?
I do. Yeah. I mean, when I broke my leg, the skis just gave away, and I went on my hip, and then I twisted my leg and it broke. So it was such a weird, wacky thing that came out of nowhere. It was hard to trust myself for a little while. But I've kind of fought that battle.
That's crazy. Let's talk about Avalanche safety right now. You were a part of a group this past couple of days that participated in the first ever coach and athlete snow safety workshops for national team athletes. Tell us a little bit about some of the points that you took away from that session 2 days ago.
I was actually talking to someone about this. They asked me the same question. And the first thing I said was just how serious it is. Like that, if you're going to take away one thing, it's just to remember that it's serious, and that skiing is fun, and it's so easy to get carried away. But it's also easy to be safe if you know what you're doing and you know that it's serious. So just that reminder and hearing the stories again was a really important thing for me.
Well, it was a great honor for Brass to be able to do that and talk with all of you guys over there. There was really great engagement on it. Give us a little snapshot of what your season is going to look like, when your first events are, and what you hope to accomplish this year.
So my first events will be, actually, Super G's gone well, so I wasn't planning on it. I might ski NORAM Super G at Copper. But yeah, the original plan is the NORAM circuit all year, GS and slalom, trying to win a title, which would get me a World Cup spot next year. And so Beaver Creek will be some NORAMs the middle of December. Then I'm at Burke beginning of January. And then I'll go to Europe for a few Europa Cups just to dip my toes in the European competition because it's fun over there.
Good. If folks want to follow you as fans, where's the best way to track you? Got an Instagram going?
Yeah. If you want to follow my results, actually, you can download the FIS app, the FIS app, and make me one of your favorite athletes. You search an athlete and just click the star next to me, and that'll alert you of my results. But if you want to follow me and watch some stupid little videos that I make, Instagram's the best way to do that, at Jimmy_who_.
Sweet. And then when can we expect some more guests on Arc City?
Oh, I've gotten that question, and I've got some guys lined up. So there's a Norwegian athlete who's particularly good, who I'm hoping to put on the podcast within the next couple of weeks. So look for that. Within the next couple of weeks. And I'm hoping to actually have some more consistent content throughout the winter. So stay tuned and bug me if I'm not getting content out, because I want to do it.
So Michael Eden wants to know, who's your helmet sponsor this year?
I don't have a helmet sponsor yet. I've got a few leads and a few people I've got to talk to. The support, I posted a video asking for support, and the amount of people that replied and responded and said, hey, how can I help, was amazing. So to all those people, thank you. And hopefully I'll come up with something. But if you're out there and you think you could help me support and fund my season and put a sticker on my helmet, then I'm glad to talk to you.
You know, Jimmy, I thought it was pretty cool that you also work with a few development athletes and put that Arc City sticker on their helmets.
Yeah, I couldn't give them that much support, but it was fun to have a couple athletes under my wing and promoting Arc City. Arc City is all about more skiers, more talking about ski racing, more knowledge about ski racing, more fun. Yeah.
Well, Stephen Monroe is interested in the helmet sponsor cost. And what I'm going to do, Stephen, I'm going to connect you via email with Jimmy after the show tonight, and you guys can negotiate. Jimmy, I think you're your own agent right now, right?
Yeah, sure am.
Okay, that's cool. That's the way to do it. Jimmy Krupka, we really appreciate coming on. Folks, do check out the Arc City podcast. There's some really fun interviews up there. A good one with Sophie Goldschmidt, the president and CEO of US Ski and Snowboard from earlier this year, and a great one from River Radimus. You guys had a lot of fun. So Jimmy, thank you so much for taking some time tonight to join us.
Absolutely. To everyone who's here putting in the work and getting education, I applaud you. Nice job. And thank you, Tom, for shouting out the podcast, and thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jimmy. Jimmy Krupka from the US Ski Team. You can watch him coming up this season. We have one more element of our show tonight, and I'm going to bear with me, and I'm going to bring this back up onto the screen. And again, if you haven't done it already, there's your QR code if you want to check out Jimmy's podcast. Shout out again to our sponsors. And just a couple of upcoming events that we've got. We have another Brass 101 coming up on Wednesday, November 30th with Lel Tone. Lel is a legend in avalanche safety. She is a patroller at Palisades Tahoe in the Tahoe area, and also spends her springs up in Alaska as a heli guide. In fact, in 2014, Outside Magazine rated her as one of the top 10 mountain guides. So a great one coming up on Wednesday, November 30th. And also marking the date of Thursday, January 5th. That is Bryce and Ronnie Day, the day that we remember each year, a date, the anniversary of the tragedy. We'll have a special program for you that evening. And I want to also ask, before we show off-piste here, there's another QR code on your screen. So I ask you to please grab your phones, snap this one, get the link. And if you can make a small donation to Brass Avalanche, it would be much appreciated. We put on these free programs for your benefit. So if you can spare $5, $25, $100 or whatever, just scan the QR code and we would really sincerely appreciate your donation. We're going to close this evening with a very special showing of Off-Piste. This is a documentary that was developed by Brass a few years ago to really recreate and document what happened that day on January 5th, 2015 in Solden, Austria. What were the problems that occurred that day? What were the decisions that were made, and what did they lead to? So I invite you now to just take a minute and pause what you're doing, put your phones down, and just watch this for the next 13 minutes. It's very impactful, very emotional, but that's why we do this at Brass.
Ronnie! You guys see him up there? Guys, what should we do? Start digging!
Are they wearing beacons?
No beacons.
Dispatch, possible 2 avalanche victims buried.
Here.
I see something. Is this one of your friends?
Yeah, that's Bryce.
No pulse. Starting CPR. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Lift on 3. 1, 2, 3. Are you sure there were only 2?
Yeah, there's 2.
There's 2. Okay, we're gonna find him.
Ronnie!
Not breathing, no pulse. Sorry, CPR.
Nature can turn deadly in a matter of seconds.
It's hard to believe that such a tragedy could happen.
The accident has left many in the skiing world in shock.
Tragic news tonight as 2 elite skiers training for a spot on the U.S. Olympic team are killed in an avalanche.
Rescue crews from Solden were on the scene immediately with multiple helicopters.
Our thoughts and prayers are with those who are apparently lost in this specific incident.
Go for it, Brycey!
Who are you? I'm Bryce Astle. How does the gangster chains play into effect in your slalom skiing?
Pretty aerodynamic.
Happy birthday to you.
I was shattered, and I know everyone around me was too, and can't even possibly imagine what it was like for the families.
Losing Bryce and Ronnie was a huge hit to the U.S. team. They're the next generation. These two guys were the best in their disciplines. Bryce in slalom, Ronnie in downhill and Super G. They were the next up-and-comers. They could be the guys competing in the Olympics.
This is the famous smile because he had just won U.S. Nationals Juniors.
He always had my back, and it makes you appreciate it more now that he's not here, you know?
Bryce was such an important part of my life, and after we lost him, it was a pretty easy decision for my wife and I to name our son Bryce.
He lived for every moment. He would get done training and he would go out and he would ski.
And this is a card that we made up at the time we lost the boys, and it has Bryce, so amazing on skis, and Ronnie in his element going 70 miles an hour through the air. He was kind, and he was grounded.
Ronnie, he was always just a jokester. He wasn't afraid of the World Cup vet. He would just always speak his mind to me, and I love that about him, you know?
Watching him laughing just made me think, wow, I have the best brother ever.
He was a good teammate, he was a good friend, a good son, and we had a lot of fun together.
January 1st, 2015, I took Bryce to the airport. He was going to hook up with Ronnie Burlack and the rest of the U.S. ski team. They were going to Europe to train for Europa Cup.
We got to Solden, and it had just snowed a lot.
Obviously, there's no training because there's so much snow. So we sent everyone out to go ski around and have some fun.
Just seeing snow that's untouched and being like, this is a dream come true.
We were having an amazing time.
We could see the bottom of the valley, we could see the road, so we started skiing.
I just remember skiing across this face, and all of a sudden, I just heard cracking.
Everything underneath me started moving.
I saw Bryce, and I heard him say, oh shit. I never even saw Ronnie. We stood there, and we watched them go. Nothing made any sense. Then it just instinct took over, and there were people who had skied down right before us who saw everything and pulled out their transceivers.
Are they wearing beacons?
No beacons. No avalanche equipment.
I need shovels.
That was when I realized how stupid we were being.
Okay, does anybody have a probe? We're at the bottom of Solden 1. We need helicopter, 2 more patrollers, hasty team, then AED.
Probably took 15 minutes for helicopters to come in.
I was pretty aware that it had been too long. The first thing that appeared was Bryce's boots sticking up out of the snow. He was upside down. His boot was 6 feet from the surface. Came across Ronnie a few minutes later.
Ronnie, we got him! Did you get him out of the hole?
That was an image that I'll never forget.
The concept of riding up a lift, skiing on a trail, and we're in danger, that did not exist in any of our heads.
The coaches and the boys did not receive any orientation or any training regarding the dangers of skiing in Europe versus skiing in North America.
None of the young men in that group knew the difference between on and off-piste. Off-piste in the United States is defined as out of bounds, going through the gate, going under the rope. That's not what the rules are in Europe. When you are off the groomer, you are off-piste.
In Solden, the day before the avalanche that killed Bryce and Ronnie, there had been heavy snowfall and strong winds. What that did is it put a lot of weight on top of the snowpack, which was fragile. Once these skiers got onto that slope, it couldn't support the additional weight. That weak layer fractured over a wide area, and that slab came crashing down. It produced debris that weighed almost 7 million pounds, the same as almost 10 747s.
It takes all of 20 minutes to learn and to be educated.
You want to make sure you're prepared. There are 5 points that are always really good to remember. You want to get the gear, get the training, get the forecast, get the picture, and get out of harm's way.
First, you need the gear. Going in the backcountry, you need a beacon, a probe, and a shovel. And unfortunately, that day in Solon, the boys did not have that.
I would have done anything for rescue gear, especially a shovel.
You can always increase your chances of being surgical if you're unlucky enough to be caught in an avalanche by having reco reflectors in your equipment and clothing.
Getting the gear is useless if you don't know how to use it. You've got to get the training. Take an avalanche class.
If we would have taken just one class, we would have known not to ski down that terrain in the first place.
One key thing you're going to learn in every avalanche class is that you have to check the forecast every time you ride.
None of us checked the forecast that morning. It would have taken just 2 minutes on the gondola ride, and none of this would have happened.
So when you're out on the snow, you gotta get the picture. And what does that mean? That means pay attention. Are you seeing recent avalanches? That's by far the most important clue. That's like Mother Nature screaming in your ear.
If we had known it wasn't controlled, we 100% would not have been there.
Finally, get out of harm's way. What that means is only one person is riding the slope at a time.
We were breaking one of the simplest rules. In some ways, it's a miracle that all 6 of us didn't die.
Once you get to the bottom, you need to get out of the way. That way, if somebody else in your group triggers an avalanche, you won't be caught.
These 5 simple steps everyone should know about, and everybody should be trained in. Coaches, parents, athletes, administrators of the program.
Everything that we did could have easily been prevented. I wish I could say that I couldn't have done anything to save their lives. That's just not true.
Anytime you have a major accident like this, it causes a ton of introspective thought. We realized that we really needed to look at it from the top down, bottom up. How can we make sure everybody's more educated to avert and reduce the chance of anything like this ever happening again?
That's why we at Brass are creating avalanche education specifically for coaches and athletes. We're also creating snow safety policies to be followed by ski racing groups.
Ski racing is definitely a dangerous sport. But what we're going down is a really highly regulated area. You have all the fencing, you have the snow prep, you have all these things that are out there to keep you safe. You get out there in the backcountry, there's none of those luxuries.
For the people who assume that just because they know how to ski terrain or they know how to rip down a mountain because they ski downhill, it's a very different beast.
Don't let this happen to you and your family. Get educated, get out there, so we can keep skiing for Bryce and Ronnie, so their legacies live on.
I want to thank all of you again for joining us here tonight. This is a very impactful film. It was a very tragic day, but out of that has come an educational program that hopefully will give you the opportunity to learn before you fall into a similar situation. Again, we want to thank all of our sponsors from Brass. We really appreciate their support. And again, one more time, if you feel this has been a valuable program tonight, just take your phone and click on the QR code. If you can drop us a few dollars, be that $5, $25, $100, or whatever, it all goes back to help us provide more programs like this to help skiers just like you. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight. On behalf of Ben Mirkin, Cindy Burlack, and the entire Brass educational team, thank you for educating yourselves and pass the word on to others so we can all be safe this winter. Have a great season and be safe.